one potential cost of AI is what it hurts, what it wipes out, but another, mainly in the form of jobs, but another potential cost of AI is what it prevents, and that will be a more invisible cost in the sense that we won't be able to see what we're losing. It'll just be lost. And so something you've written has really stuck with me, this idea that it may prevent real scientific breakthroughs, because if we start to rely on this sort of endless loop of iteration in science, of just trying to squeeze more out of what we know instead of that real creative leap toward what we don't know that has characterized most of the great scientific discoveries, that will actually, AI will actually stymie our progress rather than advance it. Am I summarizing that well? And how do you think about that?
That's right. I do think AI has great potential for science if it is used right. Right now, I don't think we're on that path. I think right now, as a scientific community, we are misusing AI more than we are using it responsibly. And that's for a few reasons. One metaphor that I like is adding more lanes to a highway to try to fix a traffic problem, when the real problem is that there is a toll booth that everybody has to pass through. So by adding more lanes, you're only incentivizing more traffic, which is going to make the congestion worse. In many ways, I think that's what we're doing as a community with AI for science. When you look at what are the actions, so here's what I mean. What are some of the real bottlenecks to scientific progress? It's not producing more papers. We already produce millions of papers per year. That number has been growing dramatically over the decades. It's not leading to true breakthroughs. And there has been a lot of hand-wringing about this already in the scientific community. And one pattern that's been observed is, this is a paper by Chu and Evans, is when a field gets larger, when papers are coming in at a bigger rate, it actually gets harder for scientists to wrap their heads around everything that's going on in that scientific community. So they have a tendency to gravitate towards the most prominent, the most already popular, the most central ideas in their field. And this actually slows down the entry of new ideas that might be radical at first, that might challenge the currently prevailing ideas. And we've seen throughout the history of science that the new radical idea, the idea that the sun is at the center of the solar system, for instance, when it was first spoken, it was almost unthinkable, right? So how do you go from radical fringe idea to the new consensus? That's the real bottleneck. It's not accumulating more facts within existing paradigms. It's realizing that something you thought you knew is actually wrong and moving to the next paradigm that challenges what we think we know. And so the way that AI is being deployed is more in the accumulation of existing facts phase. And what it's doing is it's further increasing this kind of traffic jam where there are too many papers coming in, so that scientists are forced to gravitate toward the comfort of clinging to the ideas that are already popular, which is making it harder for this inherently sociological process, right? Determining what is radical and nonetheless worth further experimenting so that it might one day become the new normal. That's not a job for AI. That is, at least for now, intrinsically a job for humans. And therefore, this avalanche of new, greater productivity, partly due to AI, is actually jamming up that process. There's more to say on that, but that's the fundamental core concern.
But speaking of research, you raise a point which is very dear to me, which is the influence of control over the data on the entire ecosystem of research. Is the fact that today most of the most valuable data are in the hands of private firms who, number one, don't share it widely, and number two, pick and choose the people that they share with to basically shape a bit what kind of research is published. And you claim that other fields do much better, like medicine. I think is a bit too optimistic, but I think that this is a gigantic problem that we're all facing, and we don't have enough antibodies yet.
Yeah, I mean, maybe let me speak to my field, computer science, so that I don't say anything about medicine that you might find too optimistic or inaccurate. So early on in the history of the field, the idea that computing technology could have negative impacts, that was not really something that people paid much attention to in the nascent years of computing. So there wasn't really any necessity to to have a culture of some or many computer scientists being independent of tech company interests and being an external voice of research and accountability. So that is, I think, sorry to violate my promise of not talking about medicine. I think that is a way in which it's very different from medicine. When on the few occasions where I go give a talk at medical conferences, the seriousness with which they treat conflicts of interest and asking me about all of my commercial relationships with companies, they're of course worried about pharma companies. But I wish that in computer science we had anywhere near that level of scrutiny of what are academic computer scientists' relationship with these technology companies. And we don't. And it's just assumed that every computer science professor has ties with big technology companies and or has a startup on the side. And I think that's quite unfortunate. Not everybody needs to, take some kind of vow of purity and not have anything to do with tech companies. But I do think we need some subset of independent technology experts in academia who don't take money from and are otherwise intellectually independent of tech companies. We don't have that today, and all of that contributes to the problem of tech companies owning all the data and making external researchers essentially so subservient, because if they want to do good research, they're so dependent on access to not just data, but also computational power from technology companies.
I think that's such an important point, and Luigi has gotten me hooked on this idea too, because I also think it's one of the things where the external impression is completely different from the reality of it, and that most people on the outside would think that most academics are the unbiased arbiters of truth, and would not understand all these subtle ways in which they are not. I just because this is something that I've always been interested in, I want to go back to this notion of what element of humanity, or what it is in humans that can make, or that leads to a true leap of genius. And it's kind of like the Kierkegaardian leap of faith, right? If you think about Einstein or Newton, when people have come up with this entirely new way of visualizing the world, it's just been a radical departure. And sometimes the math, the actual, hasn't even been there to justify it. It's just a way of seeing the world that's almost philosophical. So is it that our current reliance on LLMs can never get there? Is it that we don't know whether they can or not because nobody fully understands why LLMs spit out the answers that they can't? And if there is a way to sort of capture human genius, do we need to fundamentally rethink AI?
The simple answer is I don't know, but I can share some thoughts on that. One, I can say that whatever that spark is, I don't think current LLMs have that. I do want to clarify, I'm not saying that it's impossible. I do think it would require different approaches in at least two ways. One is that if you want to increase this kind of creativity without just turning it into just a random number generator, right? Well, creativity while also retaining some kind of grounding, that would be a very different kind of product from a chatbot that's useful to everyday users. So you can't expect both of these from the same system, because an LLM or any kind of AI model or system that had that level of creativity is just going to have too much randomness to rely upon for everyday use when someone just wants it to, do some shopping or whatever, right? And I mean, I think scientists are notoriously poor at doing everyday mundane tasks, and I don't know, maybe there is something deeper to it. The more, a lot of creativity is just randomness, frankly, right? Just exploring lots of random paths, and that just makes them very poor assistants for everyday users. So for that reason, that's not necessarily going to come from the companies that are building and monetizing these chatbots on a scale of millions or billions of users, right? So maybe that has to come from a different kind of research effort. I know that there are some such research efforts out there, but the scale of it just completely pales compared to how much effort is being put into making these chatbots more engaging for everyday users. And that, to some extent, belies all of this talk about, we're building AGI because we want to cure cancer. If that's what you really wanted to do, you would be putting a lot more effort into making AI actually useful with regard to some of their scientific limitations, as opposed to making them useful for everyday users.